My name's Andy Clements. I'm a Brit, as you can probably hear, but I'm based in Dubai in the Middle East. So I've been here for 5 years. I work as head of sport at a big international school, but I also do some volunteer coaching as well with the sort of local New Balance Academy. I'm a trained massage therapist, weightlifting coach, and I'm involved in lots of different sports. So I've refed the National Schoolboys Rugby final in the past. I take swim teams, but my passion is track and field. That's what I do now to an elite level. So I do. I previously was captain of one of the top sides in the UK for just over a decade. I've competed up to Olympic trials level, ran for the British Universities team a couple of times. And after a little break in my 20s, I came back to the sport and I now run at masters level. And I'm the reigning world and European silver medalist in the 400 hurdles.
What got you into the world of sports? Maybe did it start out as being the track and field, or did it start out somewhere else?
No, track and field didn't really start until I went to secondary school, which is 6th grade for you guys. It's when we go to our secondary. My parents had thought about taking me to the track, but we never did it. Like most sort of young English guys, I just grew up playing football, playing a bit of tennis, just having a go at anything really. My mum's quite into sports. Her dad and her brother, enjoyed cricket and football and stuff. So I always had sports around as a young age. But yeah, I guess really when I went to high school, I was lucky I had good PE teachers, particularly our head of sport liked athletics. He was into track and field. Had he not have been, who knows if I, would have picked it up, but he was definitely, an inspirational character. And I know he's quite proud. I'm still in contact. He's retired now, but, he loves the fact I'm still doing the athletics and doing the job I do.
So growing up, were you a pretty athletic, competitive kind of personality, or did it start out as something to kind of do with friends or something social?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I have always been competitive and, had ability. I wouldn't have considered myself overly competitive, I think, years ago, but kind of growing up, I realized, okay, yeah, maybe I am. But it's both. I like to win, but then there's the social side as well. Like I said, growing up playing football and team sports, there's that social side there. But actually what I found was going into track and field, I actually found I preferred the friendships and the relationships, particularly because I did decathlon through my teenage years. There's a lot of camaraderie there. And I got a bit fed up with some of the attitude and the bravado that comes with football or soccer, as you guys would call it, everyone thinking they're going to be the next David Beckham, and automatically we hate them because they're the other team today. And I just found within the world of track and field, 99% of the people are just so welcoming and friendly and supportive of each other. When the gun goes, you're doing your thing. And for, other than that 10 seconds or that 1 minute, it's just such a good environment to be around.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like personally for me, a lot of sports is that rivalry and, kind of it's the fun of like hating that other team for the day. And it's interesting to hear that other perspective, though. It's something that I guess just maybe, I don't know if maybe American sports do put more emphasis on that kind of rivalry and that sort of thing or not.
Yeah, the rivalry and the competitive nature, I definitely think is there, and I like, but it's more of the not being able, some people not being able to distinguish between a rivalry and sporting opposition, and actually disliking and disrespecting, the person who is that rival and that opposition. And I found in certain sports and in certain sporting cultures, there tends to be more respect for officials and the other team, etc. So, like I mentioned, in the UK, there's the divide between soccer and rugby, and my favourite sport actually to referee and to coach is rugby, because I find that's obviously it's one of the most physical, competitive sports out there. But at the same time, It's also, there's a huge amount of respect for the officials, the referees, and after the game as well. There's very much a culture of go and have a beer, or go and have if it's the little kids, they go and have a match tea, and player for player, they go and sit opposite someone and have a conversation. So I find it varies a lot, depending on the sports because the international format now, we've got 90 different nations as well. So I do see a difference depending on where people have come culturally as well. That's a factor, but also the culture within the sport and what kids see and what adults see, through the media has a big effect.
Do you think it comes down to like the physical nature of the sport itself? Like when you kind of have a chance to be a little bit more aggressive towards your competitor in the event, it doesn't let you kind of build those aggressive feelings up as much. Do you think maybe that has anything to do with it? Because I feel like in like football, American football, comparing it to maybe like baseball where there's no physicality whatsoever, or basketball where there's ever so slightly some physicality to it, I feel like it kind of grows like as you get towards the less physical the sport is. I feel like the outbursts seem to be worse than in football. It's like you get to, American football, you get to tackle and hit and do all these things. So whenever you have a skirmish, it's almost more just talking. But in other sports, you might have, physical violence in those skirmishes.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, it's an interesting one. As part of like the sports lecturing that I do, we look at personality types and whether there's a link to personality types and the sort of activity that people do and that they're drawn to. And it depends what you're looking for, because you could argue there's correlation within that. But I think more so it's the culture and the role models that people see within the sports that affects those behaviors and the expectations. You go to a hockey game and you're kind of disappointed if you don't see a fight break out, right? The fights are more exciting than the goals sometimes because you can't even see the puck anyway from your seats. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I see, again, it depends. So my elder daughter, she does karate. I did a little bit of martial arts when I was younger as well. And again, you see that's it's highly physical, but at the same time, there's a huge amount of respect and discipline. And that's the very reason why a lot of people, pick it first and foremost, is that respect and discipline. And then the self-defense is almost like, the secondary or the tertiary issue on that. So again, I think it really does come, the nature of the sport certainly has an effect, but I think the culture and the examples there for the athlete, I think, are the primary factor. I think what you see with the fighting sports, and particularly with MMA, and the boxing, a lot of the stuff is the preamble and the promotion of the fights, and the whole Conor McGregor kind of showman, and Floyd and those guys. It sells fights, and personalities sell fights. So that's obviously played up. And when you get characters like McGregor and Khabib, and they are two different personality types coming in, and you see these polar extremes, that it's definitely played, to kind of push them apart to make up the ante and stuff. So watching the elite stuff, it is different to being in, the dojo and seeing, the grassroots level and the day-to-day stuff.
So at what point in your life did you start to notice yourself becoming, separating yourself from other people you're competing with?
I was always doing well as a kid. As I said, growing up playing football, it's quite funny because my best friend from when I was 9-10 years old is also now living out here in Dubai, and we hadn't had contact for years. And him and I used to play against all the other kids in the class at football. It was me and John, and when we got to 16, he made the England schoolboys rugby team, and I was ranked number 1 in the UK with the octathlon, which was the decathlon -2 events at the time. So I guess, through that was probably when I really started to kind of achieve. But going to high school, there's that. Certainly, I went to just your local state, what you'd call like a public school, like your local state comp. And until you get to, it's changed a bit now, but until you get to the age of 11, 12, there isn't a lot of competitive sport the previous job I was at, working in the private sector, the kids have, from the age of 5, 6, they're playing all these different sports, all these different equipment, 4G turf, etc. But we had one football team at the school, and that was it. You got into it or you didn't. That was it. No other sports. So it wasn't really until I went to secondary school that there was the opportunity to compete at different sports, and that's when obviously you can kind of branch out. You can find your thing. And I mean, with track and field, it's easy to know where you're at as well. With something like playing those invasion games, it's very subjective. I mean, I had trials at with a couple of top sides at the time, Swindon Town, Southampton, but you never know exactly what you got to do. And as a young kid, you think they just want to see you beat everyone. You think the more turns, the more I hog the ball, the better. But with the track and field, if you cross the line first, you've won the race. And if you make that time gets you into this. And yeah, so it was just, I was saying to someone the other day, first time I ran on a track was, I was 12 years old. You win the local district one, you move on, you do the regional, you win that, and you realize, hey, I'm pretty decent at this. And I was 12, and next year I turned 40, and I'm still doing it, still getting the buzz. Keep running for long enough, everyone else slows down.
Yeah.
Try and hold on to some of the speed of your youth.
Gotcha. And do you feel like the diversity of playing different sports was a benefit to you when you went to the track and field as like your primary?
Yeah, definitely. And when, in my role now as a head of phys ed at the school, I occasionally get parents asking, particularly like younger kids, when I was working more in the elementary sector a few years ago, what sports would you recommend my kids do? And I said, just let them try stuff. If I were to give you any advice, I say get them to do gym, like gymnastics, get them to gym, swim, play something with the ball, and do some track and field, because you're covering all your bases there. But the bottom line is just, try. I construct now curriculums for, schools right the way through up to 18 and school leavers, and just look for as much breadth as possible. Take some surveys as well. I can see what the kids enjoy doing. But I think, we got to appreciate the majority of people who do, when you're at school, everyone does sports. And my MO, if you will, my philosophy really is that you want to keep the kids, safe and active and fit and healthy. But on top of that as well, expose them to different activities that hopefully someone will find something that they can do with some longevity, whether they can join a five-a-side league, when they're at university, or whether they play in that squash league on a Thursday night with the people from work, or whatever it might be. And even if it's not that specific sport, at least, equip kids with some experience and some tools, and maybe a little bit of, sporting vocab to know what's going on when they do come and try different sports, or, I remember doing that at school. So, I mean, to come back to the question, I think definitely a breadth of sport and opportunity is massively important. My daughter, my elder one, she does athletics, she does swimming, football, track and field, and then like karate is kind of like the main thing. So nothing's too serious. If she really, really doesn't enjoy any of them, she doesn't need to do them. But once we've committed to something, we see that through for the year, the term, whatever it might be. But that's my philosophy. I definitely don't think kids should or need to specialize too young. There's obviously examples like gymnastics, where if you want to be elite, you got to be doing it from a little kid age. But what you see with most kids who are doing it, you see that burnout, or you see just vicarious living, their parents trying to fulfill dreams that never quite happened. So I think that can be quite dangerous in the sporting sector, and getting that balance right.
When did you get into kind of coaching and teaching and all that side of it?
When I played soccer on my high school team, I was captain with that, and again with the athletics, both at my club and my county schools level, I was made captain. So I was always trying to help out other people. Both my parents, they're retired, but both my parents were teachers. So that's just, I've always been raised in that environment, So I actually, if you'd have asked me when I was at school if I would have taught, that would have been my main reason for saying no, I'm not going to do that. But as it was, the coaching side of things, I always knew that I liked doing that. And I distinctly remember being told at the age of 18. So that's like, the oldest kind of school age. So that at that point, your kind of regional will be like the equivalent of your state team. I was captain for Hampshire, the old one, not the new one. And I remember the team manager saying, "You'll make a very good coach one day." And I said, "Well, hopefully I'll have a bit of a career first." But yeah, the coaching has always happened. I qualified as at the age of whatever you can, 18, did my athletics, did my weightlifting, and then kind of added to it from that.
If you were to compare when you were a kid in the kind of the coaching and the education in the world of sports and maybe a drop of fitness, maybe, how would you compare that then to kind of what's going on now?
I mean, it does massively vary, the access that you have on where you live within the specific country, but in the world as well. And I see that more so now, having worked in the international sector for 5 years. But yeah, I mean, the opportunity, the facilities, the coach education, it is good. I mean, you feel very much like an old man when you tell the kids, in my day we were lucky to whatever, jumpers for goalposts and that kind of thing. But yeah, does it necessarily make kids more competitive? Possibly not. Kids have a wealth of so many things and so many other things, and iPads, computer games, etc. But yeah, there's the opportunities there, but it doesn't change the need for the desire, the commitment, and the base fitness. Where maybe we understand more. There's more ways of tracking things. You got your smart watches on and this and that. But it doesn't change the fundamentals of having a little bit of talent and a lot of commitment to make something of it. You look at some of the best athletes. I have some links with Kenya. I sponsor a couple of athletes in Kenya, and just through a friend at university. And so I said we were going to go right before the COVID stuff all hit, so didn't manage to get out there. But yeah, you see the amount of talent and what's being achieved off next to nothing. Some of these guys that I help support now, they got their first pair of running shoes, sneakers, at the age of 14, 15. So there's huge opportunity in terms of what kids and people have access to, the coach education and stuff. That I think makes the when I'm thinking about that, the access to coaching and guidance is probably the more important factor, because that's what I see. One of the Kenyan lads that I help has just made his first world team for the World Relay Championships in Poland next month. But what they really struggle with is getting the quality education and day-to-day coaching there. And yeah, the fact that there is undoubtedly better coach education and better quality within those courses is massive, but it's within, mostly first world countries and certain pockets of that.
Do you think that because technology is becoming more, prevalent in entertainment and all that stuff, do you think that these first world countries who have these technologies to where kids are maybe they're becoming better at technology instead of better in the worlds of, the physical world, like sports and fitness and all this other stuff?
Yeah, I think definitely that there is, we see that within this region. And again, a lot of it is cultural, and also the fact we have, really kind of extreme temperatures in the summer and stuff. So the kids maybe won't be out doing so physical, but I think it is more of a cultural, and I'm not just talking like a national culture, but even a culture like subcultures within specific schools, or little pockets. Because I've come from, I was working in the private elementary in Surrey in the UK, and now I'm working I work with grades 6 to 12, and you take something like the multi-stage fitness test scores. The average scores for my 14, 15-year-olds are below what we were getting for 10, 11-year-olds, and that's got nothing to do with, talent. That's to do with the culture, and partly, the national culture and the sort of parents that we have. But I think more so, the culture, the subculture in that little sort of microcosm, and the expectations and the norms. And definitely, I can say, where I am now, working with the kids who I'm working with, the fact that there is technology, games, iPads, and particularly this last year, it's really, really bad, because we can't at the moment we're very limited on what we can do within phys ed lessons. So 2 kids can't touch the same piece of equipment. I'm having to go around and 1 kid serves a table tennis ball, and then we have to spray them all after 5 minutes, and then the next kid can serve, it's 2 meters spacings. Some schools have obviously been closed for a long period of time. We don't do any, co-curricular activities, no teams at the moment. And the kids, they have to be sat on chairs all 2 meters apart, with their masks on. And what are they doing? They're playing Call of Duty or, whatever it might be on their iPads, on their phones. So I think that's really been confounded this last, the whole pandemic thing has made things really, really difficult with that.
Yeah, and it seems like it's become like almost unscientific in so many ways when it comes to just like comparing the threats to the youth, as far as like, if we're looking at the statistics, and I don't have exact statistics, but we do know at this point, like obesity and COVID plays such a huge role. And, I saw this study today where they said that the fitness, having basically any level of fitness past just sedentary, it was a, a huge factor in cutting down on hospitalizations, on death rate, on all these things. Like, it seems like we're doing the youth a disservice, because I don't think COVID's necessarily going to be a big deal for them, but maybe in 40, 50 years, if something else happens when they're at an age to become susceptible and they don't have that strong background of health and fitness, I think that's potentially where we're setting up the youth for a lot of failure.
It's difficult. And it's slightly different within the coaching, the coaching line and the PE line. But certainly within education, even kind of pre-COVID, there, and if you look at the IB curriculum, the International Baccalaureate, I know colleagues who have worked in, American system, UK systems, IB and stuff, and the focus is so much on what are the kids learning, as opposed to necessarily what can they physically do or what is the activity levels. It's a very difficult juggling act when you look at, what is a successful phys ed lesson. When you're looking at a coaching perspective, it's like, what can the kid do? It is performance. And if the kid doesn't necessarily, or I say the athlete in general, doesn't need to necessarily understand the process, it can be advantageous. Sometimes it can be actually a difficulty, because people start to question the process and question the coach. But in terms of, the general youth and phys ed lessons, certainly where I teach now and kind of in the UK a little bit as well, the fact it's, and I agree with teaching through sports, not just teaching to do sports, but you got to be careful that you're not neglecting, that the pulse raising and the physical activity, because it's easy to do. And I've noticed it particularly, although I don't teach IB, having gone on some courses and seeing the focus and seeing, it's great to have this inquiry learning and to be ticking all these, these strands and getting the kids to, compose this and do that and contrast and, expand their vocabulary and all these kind of things. But yeah, it's, someone was almost talking about health lessons as like or doing fitness lessons as some taboo kind of dirty word, that the kids shouldn't be just doing fitness. They have to be learning something. And yeah, there's a definite balancing act, but from my perspective and from having seen a number of peers and educators and courses run, there's a real danger that phys ed, and being in Dubai, I can kind of say across the globe, because these are people coming from many, many different nations, teaching a number of different curriculums, that, phys ed is losing some of that physical nature.
Does it feel like to you, in a weird way, maybe, if you compare the kids of today's generation versus maybe 50 plus years ago, that teaching like physical education is almost like history lessons? It's like, oh, remember when we used to be like, when we used to do this, like, this is what we're going to do today. And back in the day, this is what we used to do, like on a daily basis kind of thing.
Yeah, there's a bit of that. I mean, sports change and evolve from one side, but then I remember my first kind of teaching job, and we had one of the old boys who just retired. He used to drive the minibus, and tell me stories of, back in the day when he was teaching, 70s, 80s, and that was two kids have a problem. They go in the gym at break time with a pair of boxing gloves and they sort it out, and the teacher supervised, and that was it. So I'm not suggesting we necessarily go back to that, but it reminded me when you said that, and how things change. And certainly, yeah, when I think about my experiences kind of being in high school in the 90s, yeah, there is a shift and there is a difference. But yeah, I think, and another factor is just in terms of we're fortunate in Dubai because it's not so much like this, but how willing and parents are, or how safe it is for parents to let kids go out and play. Because when I was 10, could cycle off to the park and you come home for dinner time. I don't know how many parents in the UK would now let their 10-year-old cycle off, whatever it is, quarter of a mile, half a mile down to the park, be gone for a few hours. Of course, you didn't have a phone then, so you're out of contact for a few hours. This is a reason why we're very fortunate in Dubai, because Dubai is incredibly safe for that stuff. It's one of the the safest places you can be. And we're very fortunate that if you lose sight of your kid for a couple of seconds, you're not panicking. But in the UK, and I know kind of within Canada as well, because that's where my wife is from, and I'm again, I assume from what I hear and what I see in the States, similar thing. You lose sight of your kid for more than a couple of minutes, and you're starting to worry, you're starting to panic, and that I won't say a lack of freedom, but certainly, well, yeah, potentially for kids, not in a bad way, but that ability just to go off and be active and run around outside and climb trees and go exploring in the woods, definitely has a bit of an impact.
Yeah, I think that's such a big part of like growing up and discovering things on your own, being able to solve problems on your own, being able to do all these things like on your own or with a peer, like among your peers. And it's so weird because obviously I can't speak to past generations. You just know what you get told or see on movies, but it feels like, are there really that many more bad people around? Is it really that much more of a threat today than it was before? To me, it seems like it how can it be? I mean, human nature is human nature. It almost feels like there's just for some reason there's a bigger worry. There's been more worry pushed upon us for whatever reason.
Definitely. I mean, and without getting kind of too deep in kind of conspiracy theories and stuff, there's definitely, whether it be that, I think there's a factor, fear controls people, and gets people to do and act and think and vote in certain ways. And I'm not saying these things don't happen, but also when you look at the news, you might have one positive story, but it's shock and horror and gore and sorrow tends to sell when it comes to the media, and you look and it's all generally like woe and gloom. When I scroll, I keep an eye on the BBC stuff, and and I look at the news occasionally, and I think again, you wouldn't have heard of something happening 50 years ago that was happening in another country necessarily, whereas now everything's just out there on the internet. So I guess it depends on your frame of mind as well. Pessimistic people will think things are always worse, but people will say how dangerous it is, how dangerous London is, for example, or New York or whatever it might be, and the reality is they're safer than they've ever been, and the world is safer than it's ever been. The chances of getting stabbed 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 500 years ago, you get stabbed, no one will care and no one will report on it.
Yeah.
And I think it's right that you're saying it is human nature and it's no worse. Just there's more of us, there's a lot more of us, and we know a lot more about what's going on across a lot wider area. I think that's my sort of personal sentiment on it. But yeah, when you think about it, we're living in the safest time there's ever been from a number of perspectives.
Yeah, it's weird from that perspective because we are living in such a safe time. We have all this technology to communicate and at any time, anywhere. We have, seems like there's cameras everywhere.
But we're taught to be afraid.
Yeah, it's so weird. It's I don't know. I don't really. and it's, I don't know how it ties in to fitness or health, or if that's a deeper thing that maybe that's just like a kind of it kind of happened by accident. But yeah, it's just, there's
Like
so many.
coincidentally, I mean.
Yeah. It just seems like there's just so much more panic and worry and fear nowadays. But I think maybe too, the safer, because like right now with COVID and everybody's wearing masks, and it's like, how many people are getting, if you throw out COVID, how many people are getting sick from other things now? It seems like their numbers are down so much more.
Well, that's the thing. If someone dies of pneumonia and they had COVID, then COVID goes on the report, right?
Yeah, but it seems like there's so much less disease or illness outside of COVID. So is that going to be a factor where people are continuing to wear masks afterwards because, oh, look how safe we were from these other things that we, previously had to worry about? So maybe just as you become safer, you just get in that comfort zone. So yeah, I don't know. It's a weird rabbit hole to go down.
Certainly this ultra sterile environment, is from a number of perspectives counterintuitive, isn't it? Because your immune system needs to build up some resistance. And I joke, sometimes that, I was a kid just playing in the mud, and if I find sweets down the back of the sofa, as long as I can brush them off, I'll still eat them and stuff. But I hardly ever get ill, and you compare it to when I think back to school as well, the number of kids who had, allergies or inhalers and stuff, it was so rare. And I know you go further back, it was even rarer again. And again, that's a whole nother line, whether, it's to do with like diet, chemicals, etc., or just, my personal sentiment is there's definitely a massive factor in terms of, kids who just aren't allowed to get dirty, play in the muck, and you see, we had a kid who has been out from school the whole time, because parents are very worried, very concerned. He caught COVID. He's been home learning for the whole last year, and out of all of the students we have, these parents are some of the most concerned and protective. Still got it anyway. Super sterilized, couldn't play in the park, couldn't socialize. And then now you've got a really mad teenager.
It's weird. It's like we're devolving to be less fortified. Our body's less physically, it's less, and then it seems like mentally we're kind of struggling there as well. I don't know if the physical nature plays into that or not, but do you think that there's any kind of connection between the physical and the mental kind of struggles we're seeing from the youth?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely believe, there's a link, physical, mental health and psychosomatic effects. If you think something, is going to affect you, if you think it's real, then it is, and from a sports and a performance perspective, again, I was talking about this fairly recently. If you think your new cleats or your new trainers are going to help you perform better, you've already got an advantage because you're in a positive state of mind. Now, how far that, you can carry that in terms of, how much can it affect your health? I think certainly you see within stress, you see within something like when I teach the kids, something like an anticipatory rise in your heart rate when you're getting nervous shows you that your thought process affects yourself physically. Now, how far that goes and how much that affects you, that's obviously debatable, and that's East and Western medicine, but I'm interested in it. I've not, really studied it enough to make, comments, but certainly, yeah. Again, mental health and physical health, clear link. The mental health thing at the moment seems to be a massive issue. Again, short-term perspective with COVID and isolation and concerns and worries. I get that as well, but also in terms of the mental health, I do wonder whether it's a bigger talking point, and it's great that it's kind of more on the table and it's less taboo and people can speak about mental health. I also wonder though whether it's almost kids are you're almost like the equivalent of a mental hypochondriac. Kids are starting to think and wonder, well, am I unhappy and am I, you know what I mean, when those, because we never thought about mental health, and there were probably kids who were suffering from depression. I can't think that it would be many. But again, I wonder, because there's so much emphasis on it, that you're exposed to education on it, which is no bad thing. But it also, do you start second guessing and doubting that? I don't know. I'm not saying anything's necessarily right or wrong, but that's my personal sentiment and thoughts on it. And certainly, I think that physical activity, getting those endorphins going, in and a bit of serotonin, getting out, moving, being happy. I know for me, it's massively beneficial. One of the big display boards I have, like in our main atriums, it's from one of the main UK tabloids. I think I found it online, and it's looking at studies and the positive effect of continuing sports participation during times of examination, how it helps people focus, and links into studies again about some of the top leaders and top performers have also been top sports people. You see a disproportionate amount of leadership in education coming through from phys ed. Like, I don't know how it is in the States, but so many headmasters, principals, vice principals, etc. have come through from physical education, whether they're just trying to get off the sports field once they hit the age of 40, 45, that might be a factor, but also whether people believe that sports people are going to make good leaders because of the nature of sport, and we've been told, again, that may be a factor. But again, personally, for me, I do think that sport helps build mental resilience, and certainly doing an event like the 400 hurdles, which is nicknamed the man killer, and you're constantly putting yourself through physical and mental anguish just to do the event. I definitely think that transfers into a number of areas of life. And that's, my experience and my main sporting event. But certainly having that fortitude can definitely, in my opinion, transfer from the sports field into other areas of life.
Yeah, I think something that you said was interesting between Eastern and Western medicine. I think a good connection between those two are the placebo, and that's something that's very popular in the Western medicine. It's the placebo, and it's meant to have some effect, but it's actually nothing. It has no medicine value to it. It's just this thing to make you think, or maybe not think that it's something. I think that's like one of the best ties between like how we really do, our thoughts really can control, or the thoughts that maybe we're told. A thought is a very powerful thing, and it can control our brain. It can control what our body does.
I mean, at the moment, I'm teaching some sports psych, and we're looking at the classic Pavlov, Skinner, and Bandura stuff, and theories of learning and cognitive processing, and it's interesting. I'm engaging with that for the first time. I studied some psychology when I was younger, and definitely having kids as well. You see, I was working with kids for a long time before I had kids, but you see that young kid, and they fall over, and the way that they react is so dependent on your initial response to them. And I see with other parents, and obviously that have then made decisions to parent a certain way myself, but you'll have seen it. There's the parent that goes over and fusses over the kid's going to cry and think that they're hurt, or the parent that goes, oh, it's fine, it's all right, brush it off, we're fine, aren't we, Sinner? And you sort of you shape that kid's perspective of reality, based on, because you are their source of of knowledge and comfort. So you can massively, affect. And it's the same thing, I see it to a more subtle degree in coaching and in teaching as well. The kids put trust in you, and the way in which you respond, and the way that you encourage, and the way that you feed back has a massive effect. It's like we were saying in terms of your thoughts becoming reality. I mean, we won't know for many years, but you think that a cognitive process sparks a neural signal that initiates a muscular response, right? We know that happens, but above and beyond that, and again, there's cognitive processes again can stimulate hormonal responses as well. So I think there's definitely that's definitely not the end of the line. And like you were saying, people thinking, whether you call it positive mental attitude or Eastern medicine, you know, like self-help, self-belief, whether that tinges into religion, whether that's, you know, in kind of ancient practices like yoga and breathing. There's definitely stuff there. And it is interesting when, you know, this kind of East meets West and how it's applied within a sporting context. Something I, about 10 years ago or so, was dealing with a physio who was talking about kind of breathing techniques, just in terms of to release and just to kind of stretch and release. Problems with my knee, so just, you know, trying to get some movement patterns. Talking about forced breathing and blast breathing and getting the diaphragm engaged as you go through your ranges of motion to try and almost kind of override or just reset the computer. And the fact that the diaphragm is one of those muscles that's working all the time, kind of autonomously, but also you've got conscious control of, you know, and controlling and taking control of that can help in terms of relaxing the rest of the body and allowing your body to let go and find new ranges of movement and stuff. I found it very interesting, and I've kind of never forgotten about that.
I actually talked to a guy just the other day about, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but the Wim Hof method. Mm-hmm. And it's something before him I never heard about. And so I wanted to talk with him about it, and just learning about, it's kind of like the East meets the West again, like the breathing. It's such a simple thing you can do, like,
and the thing that people have been doing this probably for millennia as well, because you got to think that, okay, so there's been development certainly in terms of like more fat in the diet and the human, you know, brain growing, but really you're not looking too many from an evolutionary perspective. You're going back 1,000, 2,000 years isn't really many generations. It's not a lot of, you know, biological divergence, but in essence, people 2,000, 3,000 years ago were, you know, as intelligent as people these days on the whole. Not so many people, but you're thinking you just haven't got the technological advancement there. But people are still going to be bright and work stuff out. If you do it without the science, without electricity, without this and that, people worked out, you know, particularly across like China and India and various parts of the world, something as simple as controlling your breath and your breathing. You know, when you can't measure someone's heart rate, but you can see and you can know and you can feel that there's an effect in controlling your breath, for example. And we're kind of getting back to that.
It's a cool direction I think we're heading when it comes to, in a lot of ways, I guess it's a difficult direction, but in a lot of ways too, I think we're learning more about the good things. And it's tough because, like I said, we're in a difficult position with like businesses selling supplements or you know, fad diets and all these other things become very popular. But I think if you can find the right information and get within those right groups, there's just so much cool, interesting, good information that is kind of coming to light right around.
Yeah, so you said it's sifting through the crap, right? It's sifting through the crap and the stuff that's there just to make money, just little gel pills with sugar in them.
Yeah, that's it. But so kind of going from where you were before to now, what was that cultural change like for you when you first made that move?
Yeah, there's a shift. I mean, Dubai is a bubble within a bubble. Out of the whole of the Middle East, it's the most sort of cosmopolitan, westernized area. But still, yeah, there's a big shift. I mean, you're looking at here, there's 8% Emirati kind of locals controlling 80% of the wealth. So the majority of people are expats, a lot of subcontinent workers, and then a lot of professionals from the West and the East as well. It is different. Obviously, the climate's the first thing you notice. For us, it's great. There is a big sporting culture here, not just the expats, but one of the main sheikhs. So the kind of crown prince of Dubai is massively into health and fitness. We have a month dedicated to health and fitness where there's huge initiatives all across town. It's called 30/30, and just like millions goes into that. And there's just free public access to classes, hubs, spots, fitness villages. We've got, there's running tracks and jogging trails all over the place, you know, free volleyball courts down on the beaches. It's really, really good. If you're someone, you know, if you like, you know, outdoors life, water sports, you know, and sports in general, this is a really, really good place to be. necessarily have is it doesn't have that history. Embedded, everything changes a lot. I mean, for example, like the sporting seasons, in North America and in Europe, you've got, this sport is happening now, this sport is happening there, and it's embedded and everything's there, and leagues will be very, sort of balanced out because teams have found their places, kind of across years and decades. And here, even though the expat community has been here since like the 70s, it's still, everything changes so fast. Schools and clubs pop up and close, and different leagues and initiatives kind of start, and seasons are all over the shop. So it's hectic. Sometimes it's very last minute,
Is it just the fact that there's not a lot of established kind of routine or like established things in that nature?
I think there's a huge amount of like movement of like human traffic through here. People, it's not a forever place for anyone. People come, they do 1, 2, 3, 5 years. Some people, find themselves here 13 years later. The actual kind of local indigenous peoples here is a massive minority. And you look at the shift that they've had over the case of a few generations. You go back like a couple of generations, and people would have been fishermen and pearlers on the coast, and then you've got, go back one generation, and these are the people who saw, the oil and the gas and whatever, and the commerce starting to come in. And now you see the kids and the teens kind of here, and it's this third generation. And again, it's shifted massively. So you're seeing, and the last century's seen a huge amount of shift, but here you see and you feel not just the people, but also the place. Everywhere you look, there's cranes and buildings and development, and it's amazing. We looked at the expo, the World Expo 2020 site, which has of course been delayed by a year. It's amazing the things that they're doing here. But yeah, it's just the speed of the place is frantic. We're literally in the middle of the world. You throw a dart in the middle of the map, we're right there, and you have this everything from like cuisine to sporting culture is all just kind of fusing here.
What made it alluring to you? Why did you decide, hey, this is kind of the place where I want to be?
I was actually having a chat with my friend David Maris, and he was out here at the time. And both my wife and I, she, as I mentioned, is Canadian, was already living abroad in the UK. And we were looking at opportunities. She was working in international schools, so she was already in that environment where a lot of people were coming and going, spending a year, 2 or 3, and going off. And she'd always come back and tell me that, people had, oh, so-and-so has gone to Hawaii, or so-and-so is now living in like, South America or Singapore or wherever it was. So it was something that was on the radar and something we were interested in. And it was just looking for, the right timing and the right opportunity. And the timing fell into place. The opportunity with the jobs fell into place, and everything just clicked. A whole number of reasons just all clicked. And we were like, okay, let's go for it. I still think, and I still say, it still feels like we're living and working on holiday. Most people, particularly within the UK, a lot of people just, work however many weeks of the year it is, they're 9 to 5, so they can afford 2 weeks in the sun, and the sun and the sea. Now that's, the daily life, surf, sand, sun, sport, and amazing opportunities for the kids.
Do you feel like you're in any way like an outsider still?
I say very quick acceptance, like certainly within like the area we live in now, because we were living in an apartment block, and you didn't interact quite so much here. Like I said, it's all tends to be a similar sort of age, 30s, 40s, a couple of school age kids, and we're all in this community. It's one of the oldest communities, which is only 1970s, like in villas in the community, and we've got a nice community pool and gym and tennis courts. So I think the fact that everyone's an outsider and no one's from here means that everyone's in the same boat. So it's not like, say, if I were to move, like down into like the Midwest or something in the States, right? And pretty much everyone there would have probably grown up, within like 10 miles of where they were, and people would be very established and know each other. Whereas here, like, no one's from here. Like we know Emirati families and we teach Emirati families, but in terms of the people, once we're kind of out of work, and the people that we live with and the people that we, coach and work with and play sports with, no one's from here. So everyone is all, and that is the norm, is that everyone is a foreigner and an expat. And that in itself means everyone's the same because everyone's different. The world's a big, big place, and it's fine going on holiday for 2 weeks, but definitely we are both of a mind. People ask us, oh, would you go back? When you go back, we're like, no, we'll move on. We won't go back. We're very fortunate because we both have half our family in Canada and the UK. So we could go to either of those nations, and they're both great countries and great places to live. But would we go back from choice now? No, we'd move on and we go somewhere, again, totally different. Like if we had a choice, we had to move tomorrow, we'd probably go to New Zealand. Shift in culture, climate, location, new places to explore. You meet a lot of expats, and we work with a lot of people who have colleagues last year did that shift, and other people have come in from, have gone to the States or headed off to Holland or wherever it might be.
As far as your coaching, as far as, continuing to help athletes, help kids out, what do you think if you had like a career goal, something that is more, I guess, like, to help change, not necessarily to help achieve something, but to help maybe change a norm, or to improve on something? What do you think that would be in terms of your career as a coach?
It's a difficult one. I don't look too far into the future because situations and circumstances change. I can only really look, at the now and the next few years, and I just want to keep having positive impact on kids, my kids first and foremost, my own children, but the kids that I coach and the kids that I work with, and as we said, helping kind of short-term kids understand, enjoy sports, live healthy, active lives, but also expose students and kids to opportunities that will hopefully lead to some longevity. Because the kids that I'm coaching when I do the athletics coaching now, I'm not going to see their adult careers, and I know the majority of them won't be running track and field once they leave school. Some might, but we coach what we have here and now, but with a view to educate and prepare if they want to move on and take those next steps, and if they want to stay in the sport. For the time that they're with me, I will, do my best to facilitate, support, and educate that. Would I like to be more heavily involved in athletics coaching in the future? Possibly. Yeah, maybe. At the moment, I only do a couple of hours. I do a couple of voluntary hours because between the family, of the sports, and my own training, that's all the time I've got. But yeah, I think certainly I would look to maybe have more of a track and field coaching involvement later in life. But again, who knows? You got to deal with what's on the table at the time. And once you're a dad, you prioritize the family first. And I think that's a very healthy outlook. And it for me, it's helped me find perspective as a competitor, because I distinctly remember a shift in mentality and in the way that I would approach competition. And I remember my daughter very, very young, my first daughter, she was very, very young, come to one of my first races, and it was a low-key race. Right before I went onto the starting blocks, I gave my daughter a little hug, and she was like, "Oh, good luck, Daddy," whatever. And it really helped me gain perspective in terms of, there's a quote, one of the American 800-meter runners, and I'll only be able to paraphrase it, but he's basically, it's not family, it's not curing cancer, it's just running around in circles. Be humble in victory and defeat. That's Nick Symmonds, the 2012 Olympian. I think he did the 2008 as well. And that quote, and also that's not generally being a dad and realizing the importance of that, because both my daughters were born quite premature, which is quite sort of stressful, and it makes you realize, what's important. And it makes you realize, although sport is important, it is just sport, or it is just running around in circles. I think that's been massively beneficial for me. Not having sport be the most important thing in my life definitely puts things in context and perspective.
Yeah, I think that's a really good kind of mindset to go into it with for sure. Is just being aware of what you're doing and
And reminding yourself that you're okay. So if you're in a phys ed lesson, then you have to be there. But when we're talking about coaching and performance sports, I think reminding yourself that you're there because you've decided to be there. For a lot of people, that would be from the training perspective, because I know a lot of people prefer, again, if you're particularly good doing team games and invasion sports, the match day is like the fun part. For me and some athletes, I know they actually, particularly if you're doing like a hard event, like, you're running 400 meters or whatever, you don't do that unless you enjoy hard work and training. And I've actually always enjoyed the process and the training and lifting weights and running up hills more than the race day. The race day was always a bit of stress and a bit of worry, and the feeling that expectation, mostly self-expectation, to perform and make something of all these hours that you've put in, for 5-6 months of the year where you're not competing sometimes, to try and perform in that less than a minute. And yeah, certainly kind of hitting my 30s, becoming first a husband and then a parent has definitely kind of helped with that.
Yeah, I like that. You get to choose, like, oh, hey, I don't like the situation I'm in. What can I do differently? How can I change it up? What do I actually want to do? I think that's definitely a really good point to make.
And if you've made that choice, and obviously not with those examples and to that degree, but I do say, to some of the kids, if we get to the point where it's competitive sport, and that they've opted for, it's important to know that you've chosen to do this, and remember to enjoy it, because that what's the last thought that you're sending off with your athlete or with your team. Something that advice I give to teammates, and when I've been like team captain of stuff, or from a coaching perspective, is don't forget, it sounds really cliche, but don't forget to enjoy it, even if it's like going to the Olympic Games. I've had a number of friends, training partners, colleagues, compete right through to the highest level, and that's one of the things. It's one of my old training partners. She's the top GB runner at the moment. She's heading off to Poland for the World Championship next month, and I said, "Oh, great, congratulations on the call up." And one of the first things she said was, a really fun way, to start the outdoor season. And that's just such a brilliant and correct way in which to look at the sports, and I understand where at that point at which it becomes professional, that can be difficult, I think, and it can get lost. And in a way, I've never had to worry about that, because I've never been good enough to be, a full professional. And that then links into a lot, the pressures when we talk to the kids about performance enhancing substances, etc., that whole kind of line of thing. And I was just always, because athletics is obviously notorious for that kind of thing, and I said, look, I've never been good enough to have to worry about that kind of thing. And it's kind of nice, and it's nice as well doing the masters athletics, where most, if anyone who's going to have taken performance enhancing stuff, generally, unless you're talking about, your jacked up gym guy who just wants roids for big guns, if you're talking about a performance enhancing drugs, it's going to be someone towards their game, and those sorts of people have normally done it, don't feel like, there's some people come back into the sport later during master sport, but generally that's a really nice thing about kind of master sport. You don't have to think and worry, because I'm sure I've raced someone who's, been on something at some point. But once you're in the master scene and you're doing that kind of stuff, the vibe is very friendly, very welcoming, and people's egos are generally kind of left at the door. And I also say as well, in terms of, if someone's got to the stage where they're using performance enhancing drugs, they were probably better than me anyway. So they may have beaten me by 2 seconds as opposed to 1, but whatever.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. I've never thought about it like that, but yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it too. It takes the concern, I think, the worry, or you're just, I think, more focused on yourself, what you're doing, instead of what they're doing, or maybe what they're willing to do. But I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. Absolute pleasure.